Right then, Sensah, a group set manufacturer out of China, they're about to release their new hydraulic group set, and I've been using a pre-release version on this bike here for the last few weeks, and it's probably the best Chinese group set that I have ever used. So let me show you why. My name, as always, is Luke, and welcome back to Trace Vele.
Right then, context, aka why should I care? So for many years, hydraulic group sets for road bikes were very expensive and only really available from the big three, so Shimano, SRAM, Campagnolo. Late last year, a Chinese company called L-TWOO shook things up a bit when they released their new line of much more budget-oriented, fully hydraulic group sets. I quite like them, and I've covered them in some detail already. Now, Sensah, another Chinese group set manufacturer that I've got a bit of a history with, actually, they've caught up and they're about to release this, their 12-speed Empire Pro HRD group set. So why should you care? Well, firstly, I've tried a lot of these cheaper group sets. This could be the best one to date. Secondly, while prices haven't been locked in, it promises to be really competitive. No more than 300 bucks is what I've been told. And thirdly, even if you would never touch any of these Chinese group sets with a barge pole, which, yeah, it's a sentiment that I hear a lot in my comment section, increased competition in the marketplace only ever benefits you, the consumer. So even if you would only ever ride Shimano or SRAM gear, you better hope these cheaper options are good, because it's going to force the big three to compete and most likely lower their pricing as a result. So strap in and let me show you what's on offer. So it's a 2x12 speed group set, and these are the shifters, kind of on the large side, really, and to be frank, yeah, not the prettiest things to look at. Certainly more of a utilitarian design aesthetic. The L-TWOO shifters I mentioned earlier are quite svelte in comparison. The quality of the rubber on the hoods is good. In the past, the rubber that Sensah used was pretty dreadful, to be honest with you, so they've definitely stepped up their game here. Other than that, not too much to say, apart from the fact that while they do look a bit cheap and plasticky on camera, in hand they do have a nice, solid, robust feel. The rear derailleur looks nice. The front plate of the pulley cage is carbon to save some weight, but it's pretty much unchanged from previous Sensah group sets. Not necessarily a bad thing as long as it works, which we'll get onto later. Similar story with the front derailleur, simple design, pretty much unchanged, although they have made the steel cage a little more robust. Now, the brake calipers might look familiar to some of you. I covered an almost identical looking set from a brand called Z-Race a few videos back. Great calipers actually, but they did have a few questionable design choices. Visually, these look the same, apart from the brand name, III Pro or possibly 3 Pro. However, these ones are a bit better, and I'll cover that later on. Now, looking at the weight, shifters 585 grams, rear derailleur 200, front derailleur 99, and flat mount calipers 191. So altogether, that's 1,075 grams. Just as some comparison, I'll put the weights for the same kit from some other competing group sets on the screen. So you should be able to see this Sensah HRD group set. Yeah, it's not looking too shabby, so let's get it installed. Okay, so this is my newest bike. Not my newest bike build, although I do have a little surprise in here. They got delivered yesterday, but that's something else for another video. So yeah, I've had this bike for about 6 months, and I've been running the L-TWOO RX 12-speed hydraulic group set on here, and I've run it for about 2,500 kilometers, something like that. Really enjoyed using this group set actually, but today I'm going to pull it all off and replace it with this Sensah HRD stuff here. I'm expecting it to be a pretty simple install, but you never really know with stuff like this. So I'll pull it off, film it as I go, and if anything interesting crops up, you'll be the first to know. So wish me luck. Right then, let's strip this bike down. So the chain comes off first, and after that we can loosen the cable to the rear derailleur and get that removed. Same thing with the front derailleur. Loosen the bolt holding the shift cable on, and then we can get that taken off the bike as well. After that, we can start pulling the bar tape off the bars, and because I'm a massive cheapskate, I'm going to reuse this bar tape once the new group set goes on. Now that that's done, let's get these wheels off the bike here, and we can move on to removing those green Z-Race brake calipers. Now, interestingly, you may have seen earlier, when you disassemble these calipers, they do have a random washer sat inside there behind one of the pistons, and when you shake them, you can actually hear it rattle. Now, a lot of people said that they'd removed that washer on their set of calipers, only for them to stop working. And I'm pretty sure the washer is made of steel, so yeah, over time it does eat into the aluminium body of the caliper, which isn't exactly ideal. Now, as mentioned, the new calipers from the Sensah group set, they may look the same, but they don't rattle. So I'm pretty sure they don't use a washer behind that cap, which is definitely a good thing. I tried to check by disassembling it, but that silver cap, it must use some crazy Loctite. It didn't budge even when I used an impact gun. So yeah, I decided not to break them entirely and just get them on the bike. But there is one other thing worth looking at with these calipers, and I'll cover that in a sec. Anyway, with those calipers removed, I can look to pull all of the cables and the brake hoses out. But before I do, I need to make sure I can route the new ones back through the frame. So for the rear brake hose, I'll be using this little routing kit. I can basically screw the end of this green cable into the brake hose, then once I pull it through the frame, it'll be left in place, ready to pull the new brake hose through, which you can see here. It's exactly the same principle with these shift cables, only I run some guide tubes over the top before pulling them out. And with that done, I can simply pull the shifters with everything attached straight off the bike.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
So the summer is well underway. It is hot, ladies and gentlemen, and luckily today's sponsor, Sirocco, have me covered. So I'm normally wearing all black when I'm out on the bike, but I got this white jersey on a bit of a whim a couple weeks back, to be honest with you, but I absolutely love it. It's from their SRX Pro line, so the fabric is super lightweight and breathable, and I just think it looks fantastic, especially with these white bib short straps underneath and paired with these white cycle gloves here. Plus the construction is top tier, and the pockets at the back easily hold all your stuff. And because it's white, it also reflects more of the light, so it'll keep you a little bit cooler on a really hot sunny day. I also picked up this M2 jersey, mainly because it's quite close to the Trace Velo colors, actually, so I think it looks really slick. But again, great quality fabrics, great construction, and as with most of the Sirocco stuff actually, quite minimal branding, which is nice to see. But it's not just jerseys. Sirocco have loads of other kit, including these new cycle caps, which I've been asking for ages. So yeah, if you want to pick some stuff up, use my link in the description down below. Save 10% off the entire site, and it helps me out a bit as well. But yeah, Sirocco are a great sponsor, and they've been sponsoring me to do this weird YouTube thing for a couple of years now. So yeah, definitely check them out, but let's get back to it. Okay, so the bike has been completely stripped of all the group set components. That was pretty straightforward. And I've got the L-TWOO stuff on the floor here. Nice and simple. And all of the guide tubes and stuff are in place. So this is the sort of guide cable for the rear brake hose. And I've got the cable guide tubes for the gears coming out there. So it's all set up and ready to go. So let's get this Sensah stuff stuck on the bike. Hopefully, should be nice and straightforward, but we will see. Right, firstly, let's slide these new shifters onto the bars. The brake hoses are already installed into the back of the shifters, so just need cutting to length. Interestingly, my set use a banjo-style connector at the top and no other hose connector at the base of the shifter. Not the easiest thing to work on when replacing a brake hose, but I've been told the production version will include a standard hydraulic hose connector like this one. One other thing worth mentioning about these shifters, a couple of years ago, I had a little plastic lever inside the shifting mechanism of a Sensah shifter snap on me while I was out on a ride. Sensah then updated this particular part to aluminium to increase durability, and thankfully, these shifters that function in a similar way also include aluminium parts for that little internal shift lever. Right then, ladies and gentlemen, great progress hath been made. So I've got both shifters on here, and they're basically sort of all cabled in already. So I've got the gear cable run over the top, and then the brake hose comes out the bottom here. Now with the gear cable housing, I could run it in this channel and put it under and around the bar that way, but I prefer it over the top. Just think it's a bit neater. So I've done that with both. Next step is to pull the brake hoses through the frame. So you will have seen earlier, I posted this through, so I can screw that bit there into the end of that brake hose there, pull that through, get the front brake hose in place, and then I can feed these gear cables, feed them through these cable guide tubes, get them in place, put the derailleurs on, and then we can get the brakes sorted. So let's crack on. Right, this next bit takes some time, but it is pretty simple. We're talking recabling and rerouting the brake hoses. With all the guide tubes and guide cables in place, yeah, it's pretty straightforward, and soon enough, I can start mounting the derailleurs onto the bike and getting them cabled up. Okay, so I made some great progress here. I've got the rear and the front derailleurs on the bike and they're all cabled together. I haven't even touched the brakes. I've still got the hoses sticking out of the frame here, but I really like the Sensah style of shifting, so I wanted to have a play around with it. Now, firstly, this loop of housing out the back, the first one that I tried just wasn't long enough. So this one here was far too short. I forgot just how long this loop needs to be for Sensah rear derailleurs, so I made that a lot bigger, which helped, but I've already run into some issues. So the first is that the front derailleur arm doesn't move back towards the frame far enough. So the chain interferes with this side of the rear derailleur here, down until about the third or fourth sprocket on the back. It won't actually physically move back anymore. The high and low limit screws aren't the problem. It's actually this part of the rear derailleur here, this mainspring, now hits the back, hits the frame, so it physically can't move anywhere. So in order to fix that, I've got to actually put some spacers behind the chainring to bring this chain line out about 1 millimeter or so. So I'll put a spacer down in behind there. I can't blame the Sensah front derailleur. I've had issues with other front derailleurs on this bike that have posed the same problem actually. So yeah, easy fix, fortunately. The other issue isn't so much. It might be because this is a kind of pre-production prototype version, but let me show you the issue. Okay, so I've taken the chain off here to make things a little bit easier to demonstrate, but essentially on this version of the Sensah Groupset, you can only downshift at the back up to 2 gears with 1 full swing of the lever. So I'll try and demonstrate here. 1, 2, and that's all well and good, but for whatever reason, as I continue up into the bigger teeth, on the sprockets here, well, I guess continue down, I suppose, into these bigger teeth, and the tension on this cable gets a bit stronger, the shifting just gets a lot less reliable. So I'll try and demonstrate here. So 1, 2, and again, 1, 2, 1. You can see that second click is at the very end of the lever swing, and for whatever reason, when that happens, it just doesn't index up properly with the cassette on the back, and the chain chatters around all over the place. And it's exactly the same with the chain on and everything spinning, by the way. So it might sort itself out as I get out on the road. Sometimes these things do, and it could be due to the kind of prototype nature of this group set. But yeah, so far shifting at the back does not seem to be particularly reliable.
Anyway, with that shifting issue aside, let's mount the brakes. They're flat mount, and yeah, they come with a load of brackets, so installation was very straightforward. Now, plumbing the hydraulic lines was also very easy, and this is another difference between these and the green Z-Race ones I've just taken off. When installing the brake hoses into the green calipers, they were designed in such a way that if you seated the hose all the way in, as you normally would, the hose itself would actually block one of the fluid channels to the pistons, essentially rendering the whole caliper useless. So you had to seat the brake hose into the caliper, then pull it back out about 3 millimeters before clamping everything down. And I had to sort of figure this out through trial and error. I realized the black 3 Pro calipers, they don't have this flaw. It's quite difficult to explain, but essentially they have an additional circumference machined into this hole that prevents you from seating the hose too far in and blocking that oil port. A very small change, but it makes all the difference getting brake hoses plumbed in. Anyway, enough of that. Let's bleed these brakes.
Okay, so I've got the front caliper attached to the bike, and plumbing it in and crimping the olive and everything in there was absolutely fine, no problems at all. And I'm bleeding it in the same way that I normally would. So this is a Shimano mineral oil, so pretty standard brake fluid, and I've plumbed it into the bleed port on these calipers. Now, what I would normally do then is this is the shifter, if I get right on the bike. This is the reach adjustment screw right there for the brake lever reach. This one back here, that one there, that is the bleed port. Now it's a little bit recessed into the shifter, so like you can see. So normally I would use something like this, a little bleed cup, but this doesn't actually fit into that recessed area in there. It's a little too wide to actually fit in. So I've had to resort to doing something I've done in the past. I've got a syringe down there and a syringe up here fitted into the bleed port there. So I just push them between the two, bleed out the air, and it's working absolutely fine. So this one's basically done. So I'm going to do exactly the same for the rear caliper, get that fitted, bleed it up, and we'll crack on. Okay, right, so it is, yeah, it's complete. So it's all fitted up. Yeah, I got the brakes fitted and bled, and that was pretty straightforward, to be honest with you. And the brakes feel fantastic, actually. So I'm pretty confident the braking is going to be good. But there still seems to be the same issue with the shifting. I'm hoping it'll get a bit better once it's kind of like bedded in But yeah, I'll reserve full judgment until I get some decent mileage on it. Now, the issue with the front derailleur is all fixed. You won't be able to see it, but I've put a spacer in there. I think it was a 1mm spacer, and it's batted it out ever so slightly, and it's fixed the issue. So we're good to go. So let's get some miles on it.
1 hour later.
Okay, so I just managed to get out of the house, actually. It's, I'm not sure if you can read that. It's half past 9. I've been building this group set all day, and I expected to get out here this evening and be a bit underwhelmed, to be honest with you, because it was a little finicky to get all the indexing done, and especially that issue with the front derailleur, but it's phenomenal. Shifting is so quick, so crisp. Braking is, yeah, the best braking bike I've ever ridden. Absolutely phenomenal. Colour me impressed, but let's see if it can keep it up after a few miles. So right now I'm about 150 miles into this group set here. So admittedly, not a lot, but so far I am freaking impressed. The braking performance it's incredible. Like I said in that clip, probably the best braking I've got out of any group set that I've tried, let alone a kind of more budget-oriented Chinese one. Normally, to get full braking performance out of a set of shifters, you need to be grasping the brake levers on the drops, like so. But because there's so much power available with these things, I found I can get pretty much everything I need just braking on top of the hoods, and that's just really confidence inspiring. So for example, if you're just casually riding around, the chances are you're going to be on top of the hoods anyway, especially if you're navigating traffic. And to have so much power available in that position, yeah, it's just really reassuring. Anyway, I said shifting was good, so let me demonstrate. Okay, we'll start on the largest sprocket at the back here, and then upshift a load of gears. So yeah, not a problem, nice and quick. I do love upshifting on Sensah shifters. There's something quite magical about it actually, such a light clicky action. I can downshift one gear at a time, like so. That's one, that's another, that's another, that's another, not a problem. And with a full swing of this lever, I can downshift 2 in one go. So that's 2 there, and again, yeah, easy peasy. Shifting into the big ring is super smooth, love it, absolutely no problems there. And then the shifting just continues to be nice and consistent at the back. And I can drop into the very smallest sprocket, and shifting, again, just super straightforward, super quick. And you'll notice also, I'm shifting under power here, and it seems to be coping quite nicely. I'll give it a full swing here. That's 2, and again, that's 2. So yeah, I was honestly surprised at how nice the shifting was. I wasn't expecting it. Easily one of the best shifting group sets that I've used to come out of China. Very, very impressed here. Now, I filmed that shifting piece about a week ago, and since then I've put some more miles on this group set. And while what I said definitely holds true, the shifting is pretty fantastic, I do want to add 2 caveats. Firstly, in order to consistently actuate those 2 downshifts at the back on the cassette, I think you need quite big hands. Like I showed earlier on, in order to catch that second downshift, you do need to push that shift lever all the way over to the right-hand side, pretty much as far as it can go. And these are quite big shifter hoods anyway. Like, I have large hands, and often to push it all the way across, it is at the limit of my reach. And like, I have quite big hands, like long fingers, I think. Now, as long as you're kind of nice and deliberate with your movements of that shift lever, you can catch those 2 downshifts every single time, but that lever throw for that action, it is undeniably very long. And secondly, there's this kind of overshift safety feature on Sensah shifters that stops you damaging the cable or the components on the shifter when you're in the largest sprocket at the back and you try to shift it again. For some reason, it's not working on this right-hand shifter, so let me demonstrate. Okay, so I'll try and demonstrate the problem with this other Sensah shifter that has exactly the same overshift protection feature. So imagine I'm in the largest sprocket at the back here, and I try and downshift again. This is what should happen. Hear that snap at the end?
that's that little protection feature. It does two things. It tells you you're at the limit of the cassette and there's nowhere else to downshift to, and it acts as a kind of a safety backup, so it prevents additional strain on this cable from you forcing the lever, stopping it from snapping inside the shifter and preventing any kind of damage to the delicate mechanism inside. For whatever reason, it's not present on this one. It is on the shifter for the front derailleur, and I'll quickly demonstrate here. So this front derailleur, there's nowhere else for it to kind of swing out to, and if I shift again, hear that kind of violent snap. That's that safety feature, prevents any kind of overshifting, stops any damage. It's not working on this one, or it's non-functional, so hopefully they'll fix it for the production version, because as mentioned, this is a kind of pre-release one.
Now let's talk comfort very quickly. So Joe from China Cycling, he's actually tried out a version of this group set himself a little while back. He did not find them very comfortable at all. So he said there was this little edge which dug into his palms, and I can kind of feel it. So I expected to mirror his opinion, but after riding it for the last few weeks, I think it's absolutely fine, to be honest with you, especially with cycle gloves on. I will say they're not quite as comfortable as the L-TWOO shifters, because they are just quite a lot bulkier. But as long as you've got quite large hands like me, I don't think you'll have any problems. So in summary, if you've got smaller hands, yeah, I'd probably give this one a miss. But if you've got gargantuan hands like me, I don't think they're that big, to be honest with you. You know what, I'll put my hand measurements in the description, because I genuinely think they're quite a regular size. But anyway, for me, this is probably the best group set out of China that I've ever ridden. When I'd just installed this thing and I found that shifting problem, I felt so defeated. You could probably hear it in my voice. I thought I'd spent the afternoon pulling off a perfectly good group set that I enjoyed using, the L-TWOO RX, and installing an absolute dud. But since using this for the last few weeks, of the two, I'd pick this one. The braking performance is better, especially on the hoods. The shifters don't rattle like the L-TWOO ones did. The brake calipers are a little bit easier to deal with, and from what I've experienced so far, the shifting is a bit nicer. It took a good few rides to get the shifting at the back working properly on the L-TWOO setup. The indexing is just quite finicky. This is what I had to say about it on another video.
The indexing at the back needs to be spot on. And yeah, when I say spot on, I mean it. To the point where going from well indexed and shifting nicely to a little crunchy and kind of skipping can be as little as 1 or 2 notches on the barrel adjuster here. So what's that, like 1/8 of a turn?
Conversely, indexing this Sensah HRD setup has been a breeze. I basically set it up in the garage here, rode it out, and haven't really touched it since. Plus, I'm using exactly the same cassette chain and chain rings as the L-TWOO setup. Now, like I keep saying, you will need quite big hands to make full use of the shifting performance, but it just really surprised me how good it was. Now, I used a bike with Ultegra R8000 on it the other day, which is the like pinnacle of mechanical shifting, and it's not quite as good as that. But I mean, as long as you're nice and deliberate with your shifting, it does come quite close. I mean, for $300, I'm impressed. There is just something about riding this group set. The hoods are nice and chunky, so I can get a really firm grip. The shifts are quick and reliable, and the brakes are phenomenal. I mean, it just inspires confidence when you're riding around on it in a way that the L-TWOO group set just didn't quite match for me. Now, Sensah are gonna start selling this group set very soon. In fact, in Europe, they're gonna be sort of branding it under a slightly different name, Sensah. Not Sensah. Basically, there's a Dutch company using a very similar sounding name, Sensah, with an A, so they've had to kind of adapt the name slightly. But regardless, I'll try and get hold of a legitimate production version to show you. Right then, I'm just finishing off the edit for this video upstairs, but it turns out they're going to start selling this group set in the next few days, actually. So I'll link to the official Sensah store on AliExpress down below, and also this group set once it's available as well for you to check out. Right, one more thing, I got a new frame in the post the other day. Some of you might have seen, I put a YouTube short out about it. It's from Trifox, a company I've worked with in the past. Fully carbon, fully internally rooted for this L-TWOO ERX electronic group set here. So yeah, I'll be showcasing the frame because it is, yeah, surprisingly clean and tidy kind of inside the frame. For what amounts to a, yeah, really cheap carbon frame, it is very clean inside. So I'll be showing you that, and then afterwards I'll do the full build with this electronic group set here. So couple of banger videos on the horizon. So yeah, leave me a couple baguette emojis in the comments. I will also accept croissants if baguette emojis are unavailable at your local emoji boulangerie. Right, anyway, that is all. I will see you next time. Ciao! Ding! Wah! It's the bonus clip time.
Right then, quick bonus clip at the end here. So every time I change something on my bike, I always get asked about the weight of this thing. So let's get it on the scales here. So wait for that to zero out, and there we go. So let's put this on, and it's basically got everything on the bike. So it's got both pedals, bottle cage. We've got the Garmin mount up the front there. So 7.465. Yeah, not bad, I would say, for a large bike frame with deep section wheels and yeah, fully hydraulic group set. 7.465. I reckon that's pretty good. Oh, who saw the Barbie movie? I went the other day, bought this back because it's pink and I like pink. Thought it was a good movie. Anyway, enough of that. I hope you enjoyed. See you next time. Ciao, ciao.